Birds of Poole Harbour. This is another video in our kind of video diary series, and this morning we're up on Ballard Down, which is Poole Harbour's headland, scrubby kind of habitat, chalk downland, obviously surrounded by Swanage Bay here, Studland Bay the other side. And the focus for this morning is going to be Vis-Mig, which stands for visible migration. Now we'll explain more about what that is a bit later on, but essentially we've been here, well, it's 7 o'clock now, just coming up 7 o'clock, we've been here since 6, monitoring bird migration. That's the focus for this morning, kind of counting birds and monitoring their migration. It's blooming freezing. It's the first time I've got my gloves on this season and my thermals, waiting for the birds to arrive. So let's see what birds we can see, and most importantly hear, over the next few hours. Okay, so it's now about 7:30, and yeah, Vis-Mig's really got going now. So Vis-Mig stands for visible migration, and what we're doing out here this morning is using one of these, a parabolic reflector, a parabolic dish, sound recording equipment. We've got a recorder in the bag down here, and we're monitoring bird migration. So this is a really fascinating, quite nerdy, but really in-depth way of looking at a different type of migration during the autumn. So it's different from earlier in the season when you get your flycatchers and the warblers and things like that coming through. Here, I've just got some goldfinches just going by now. But essentially what we're doing, crossbills just here. 4 crossbills just flown straight overhead. And what we're doing is we're actually listening. It's Vis-Mig, visible migration is a bit of a false name, because we're actually identifying all of these birds by sound as they fly over. So it's a new skill, it's a tricky skill, and it takes a lot of practice. But what you get in October is the finch migration, and the pipits and the wagtails, and also the thrushes that are moving at night. But Ballard down here is probably one of the best places in the harbour, along with South Haven down at the harbour mouth. It was quite a dedicated task, because you have to get up early, get in place ready to listen to the birds as they start moving. Arguably the best place actually in the country is Long Meadow at Durlston, and that's kind of where Vis-Mig really kind of come to the forefront, and locally lots of people started going to Durlston to watch this big migration. But we've started learning these migration corridors, so these channels where birds are moving through the area, through the harbour, along the headlands here, moving to different places either through the UK or abroad down into mainland Europe. What this does, so this is essentially a telescope for the ears, so really sensitive stereo mic in the middle there, and what happens as these birds fly over, you point the microphone at the birds, and the sound of the birds is channeled down into, got lots of chaffinches and linnets just above me now. The sound is channeled down into the dish, into the microphone, and then obviously into the headphones, where we can then identify. It takes a lot of practice, but there's some excellent reference material. Most notably, there's a lovely book called Catching the Bug, which is published by the Sound Approach, and chapter 14 of Catching the Bug, it's called A Flock of Birds Forever in Flight, and it is all about visible migration and being able to identify all these birds by sound. And there's lots of really good resource and reference material in there, and you can listen and read that chapter on the Sound Approach website. So anyway, I'm going to go and try and listen to some more birds, but we've had crossbills, we've had chaffinches, we've had linnets, we've had greenfinch, we've had redpoll, we've had skylark, we've had, what else? Lots of pied wagtail so far. But yeah, you never know what you're really going to get. So I'm going to crack on and see what else I can hear. So I've just finished doing a Vis-Mig session up on Ballard. It was all right, it wasn't too bad. The wind was slightly in the wrong direction. It was northwesterly this morning, and ideally to have a really good visible migration session, a northeasterly is the best. But really fascinating, and yeah, having the dish help, picked up quite a few things that I wouldn't have seen otherwise. So first yellowhammers of the autumn moved this morning, ended up on about 30, 33, 34 crossbill altogether, quite a few red poll, several hundred linnets, several hundred goldfinch, lots of meadow pipits and pied wagtails moving. But what are these birds doing? So that's the big question. Well, they're obviously migrating, but where have they come from? We're getting lots of birds now, certainly as we carry on through October, that have come all the way down from Northern Europe, from Scandinavia. So yeah, certainly things like the chaffinches and obviously brambling, which we're starting to get now, and over the next few weeks that'll build. The skylarks, even things like the goldcrests and reed buntings. I had reed buntings dropping out of the sky just now, landing in the bushes. So they're birds that are migrating for the first several hours of the day. These don't tend to be night migrants. They are at the very first light leaving the woodlands or the reed beds or the hedgerows that they roosted in last night, and covering, you know, quite a few kilometres in the first few hours of daylight before they then settle to feed again. They'll feed for most of the day, roost up in the evening, through the night, and then tomorrow morning they'll do exactly the same, carrying on that migration down through southern Britain, probably going east and west. The migration this morning was all over the place. There tends to be a very defined corridor that these birds follow, and you can actually quite often stand there and be in the flight line of all these thousands of birds. And you come up on a good day and there are thousands of birds migrating up here. It's just stunning. But this morning the crossbills were going east, the linnets and the siskins were going west, the meadow pipits were going all over the place. So yeah, it was a great morning. No, it was a nice morning. It wasn't a great morning, but there's going to be plenty more opportunity as October progresses. And you don't, like I say, you don't need one of these. You can go out and you can practice, because a lot of them aren't rare birds. It's robins are coming in at the moment as well, but things like goldfinches, linnets, siskins, greenfinches, chaffinches. And you know, you wonder why do you get excited about those? Well, you know, to see them migrating en masse, you know, hundreds at a time, certainly later on in the season, is spectacular. It's really, really spectacular. So you can familiarise yourself with the sounds that they make, these flight calls they make when they're in the garden, flying about, and then you come out to a spot and you try and put all this kind of Vis-Mig migration into practice and all this watching. So yeah, we're going to be back again, going to do some more videos over the next few weeks, but have a good rest of the day.